This story is intended for mature audiences. Names, locations, and certain details have been altered where appropriate. Listener discretion is advised. If you are listening late at night, turn the lights down low. Find a comfortable place to rest and let the story unfold. It's never midnight when it begins. Midnight is loud in its own way. People are still awake, televisions glow behind curtains, cars pass often enough to remind you that the world hasn't stopped yet. The hour when everything changes comes later. Somewhere after 1 in the morning, when even insomniacs start to lose track of time. When the mind drifts, not quite asleep, not fully awake. That's when the silence becomes noticeable. Not empty silence, but listening silence. The kind that feels like it's leaning toward you. Daniel Harper knew that hour better than anyone. He had lived inside it for most of his adult life. Daniel lived alone in a second-floor apartment above a bakery that had closed years earlier. The sign still hung outside, faded and cracked, promising fresh bread that never came. Most people walked past it without a second glance. Daniel liked that. Forgotten places felt safer. Every morning, Daniel left his apartment at exactly 6:12 a.m. Not approximately, not around 6, exactly 6:12. He locked the door, adjusted the strap of his worn shoulder bag, and walked down the narrow staircase without ever touching the railing. Outside, he turned left, walked 3 blocks to the bus stop, and stood in the same place every day. 3rd tile from the edge of the sidewalk. He waited. He boarded. He sat alone. Routine made him invisible. People noticed disruptions. They noticed noise. They noticed chaos. They did not notice Daniel Harper. What no one knew, what no one could have guessed, was that Daniel did not sleep. Not in the way most people understood sleep. Doctors would later argue about terminology. Insomnia, circadian rhythm disorder, hypervigilance, neurological dysfunction. Daniel didn't care what they called it. He only knew that when night came, his body never followed. Instead of sleeping, he listened. He sat at his small kitchen table under a single bare bulb, notebook open, pen resting between his fingers. He listened to the building breathe. Pipes knocking softly in the walls. Footsteps above him. A door opening down the hall. Water running. A cough. A laugh that cut too sharply through the quiet. He wrote everything down. Times, sounds, patterns. At first it helped. Writing gave structure to the long nights. It made the hours feel measured instead of endless. But over time, something shifted. Daniel stopped writing to cope. He began writing to control. The people around him didn't know they were being catalogued. They didn't know their nightly routines were being memorized, that their habits were predictable. That predictability to Daniel felt like permission. The first disappearance didn't cause panic. Emily Rourke was 23 years old, a graduate student who worked late nights at a coffee shop that never closed. She walked home every shift, earbuds in, same route, same pace. 2 blocks past the old bakery, past Daniel's building. The night she disappeared was unremarkable. No screams reported, no broken glass, no witnesses. She simply didn't arrive home. Her roommate assumed she stayed with a friend. Her manager assumed she quit. Days passed, then a week. By the time police were notified, the trail was already cold. Daniel wrote 1 line that night, just one. 11:58 p.m. Footsteps stop outside. No one connected it. No one could have. And then it happened again. And again. Over the next 4 years, people vanished within a small radius of Daniel's apartment. Different ages, different lives, but always the same quiet disappearance. Late night, walking alone, no signs of struggle. Police treated each case separately. Runaways, accidents, voluntary disappearances. Every disappearance happened on a Tuesday or a Thursday. Always between 11:40 p.m. and 12:20 a.m. It wasn't a coincidence. It was Daniel's schedule. By then, Daniel's notebooks had filled an entire shelf. His handwriting had changed. Where it once flowed neatly, it now cut sharply across the page. The margins disappeared. The notes became less about what people did and more about what they deserved. He believed the night had rules, rules no one else respected. People walked too loudly. They laughed too freely. They treated the silence like it was empty, not realizing it was fragile. Daniel believed he was protecting something. Sleep deprivation does strange things to the mind. It erodes empathy slowly, like water against stone. It blurs the line between observation and judgment, between thought and action. Daniel didn't see himself as violent. He saw himself as necessary. His mistake came on a Thursday. The person he followed that night didn't move the way the others had. They noticed him. They turned. They ran. And they screamed. A neighbour woke up. A door opened. For the first time in years, someone looked out into the street at the wrong moment. And Daniel Harper was seen. The arrest happened quietly. No chase, no resistance. Daniel complied with every instruction, his expression neutral, almost relieved. Inside his apartment, police found the notebooks. Hundreds of pages. Dates, times, names. The story of 8 disappearances, written by a man who never slept and believed the world belonged to those who stayed awake. During interrogation, Daniel spoke calmly. He showed no anger, no remorse. They were loud, he said simply. They didn't respect the night. Experts would later testify about the effects of chronic sleep deprivation, about distorted thinking, about obsession, about control. But none of that explained the notebooks completely. Because between the times and the notes, between the careful handwriting and the rigid routine, there was something else, something colder. Daniel had never lost control. He had planned every moment, and he had slept through none of it. Daniel Harper did not ask for a lawyer. When a detective slid the chair back and sat across from him, Daniel simply watched. His eyes were clear, not wide, not nervous, just alert in a way that made people uncomfortable, like he was still listening even now. The room was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. That sound bothered most people. Daniel barely noticed it. "How long has it been since you slept?" the detective asked. Daniel thought about the question longer than expected. "Sleep is a strange word," he said finally. His voice was even, calm. "People use it too loosely." The detective tried again. "When was the last time you were unconscious for more than an hour?" Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Years," he said. "Maybe longer." There was no pride in his voice, no complaint either, just fact. The interrogation lasted nearly 7 hours. Daniel never raised his voice, never shifted in his seat. He answered every question, though rarely in the way they expected. When asked about the missing people, he corrected them. They weren't missing, he said. They were out of place. At 3:17 a.m., one of the detectives noticed something unsettling. Daniel wasn't slowing down. Most suspects grew tired, sloppy, emotional. Words tangled as the night wore on. Daniel grew sharper. His answers became more precise, his posture straighter, as if the night itself was feeding him. When they showed him photos, he didn't flinch. When they listed names, he nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. "That's right." There was no confession in the traditional sense, no dramatic admission, just agreement. Inside the apartment, forensic teams worked for days. The place was almost obsessively clean. No blood, no obvious signs of violence. What they did find were the notebooks. Boxes of them, each one labelled with dates. 11:52 p.m. Footsteps irregular. 12:04 a.m. Breathing elevated. They disrupt the balance. They don't listen. The night deserves respect. Experts later testified that Daniel's writings showed a progressive psychological collapse driven by extreme sleep deprivation, that his moral reasoning had narrowed until the world felt binary, order or disorder, silence or violation. But there was something the experts couldn't explain. Daniel had been methodical, careful, aware. This wasn't chaos, it was control. The trial drew national attention. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Late-night shows joked nervously about the man who never slept. Podcasts dissected every detail. Daniel sat through it all without expression. Victims' families spoke. Some cried, some shouted. Some stared at him with a hatred that burned hotter than any scream. Daniel listened. When it was his turn to speak, the courtroom leaned forward. "I didn't hate them," he said. "I didn't know them." A murmur rippled through the room. "I hated the noise," he continued, "the carelessness. People forget the night is shared. They think because others are asleep, their actions don't matter." The judge sentenced him to life. No parole. As Daniel was led away, a reporter shouted one last question. "Do you regret it?" Daniel paused. For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not guilt, confusion. "I regret that they never learned to be quiet," he said. Prison doctors tried to treat him. Medication, therapy, sleep studies. Nothing worked. Daniel continued to exist in fragments, minutes at a time, never deep, never enough. Guards reported that he stood motionless in his cell for hours, listening. Years later, long after the headlines faded, a guard asked him why he never slept. Daniel considered the question carefully. "If I sleep," he said, "who listens?" Daniel Harper remains alive, awake, listening. And somewhere in that fragile hour between night and morning, the world still makes noise. Most people never notice they're asleep.